Now, if you're thinking about wildcarding in Game Week 8, don't worry, you've clicked on the correct video. I'm going to give you the ultimate guide and hopefully the best team for FPL Game Week 8. So let's go and dive into it. Now, of course, before we dive into today's video and, of course, the wildcard team, if, of course, you do enjoy any of the content that you see on the channel, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as we are getting ridiculously close to hitting that 20,000 subscriber mark. We need like 330 people to hit that subscribe button. Honestly, it'd be absolutely amazing if, of course, we could achieve that goal. I would be very grateful to everybody that has ever hit that subscribe button. And, of course, I'll shut up about hitting that subscribe button once we hit that landmark. Let's start off then first with our defense. And as you can see, it is looking very juicy indeed. We've gone for Pope in goal. We've gone for the double up of Gabriel and Urian Timber. The reason that we've gone this way rather than going for David Raya, I feel if you've already got Raya in your side, you've obviously experienced the price increases that he's had. But if I were to bring him on a wild card, I don't think he is going to be justifying that 5.7 million price tag for me. And I think the way that Arsenal are setting up from set pieces and the way that Urian Timber has started this season, he for me feels more like a valuable pickup rather than, of course, spending that 5.7 million on a Raya when you've got Pope there for 5.1 million, who will do a very similar job given Newcastle's strong starts for expected goals conceded. Let's of course take a quick look at that and see which have been the kind of obviously top teams for defensive numbers so far this season. As you can see here, very much what our defense is looking to target. We've got Arsenal in there, 4.3 expected goals over the opening 7 game weeks. They've also only conceded 5 big chances over that period. So that for me feels like why the double up, of course, is worth doing. Now, if you're really risky and don't fancy like the likes of Saka, Rice, Gyökeres, Eze, you could realistically go for that triple up in terms of the Arsenal defenders as well. And that might be an alternative route to potentially consider if, of course, like I said, you're not fully convinced on one of those other players, because Arsenal have looked so good defensively this season. And I think are probably going to give, like a Mourinho side a run for their money back in the day, one of those Chelsea sides where they just continually kept clean sheets and shut out opposition. That's how it feels watching Arsenal. Of course, they've got that set piece threat as well, which of course we're seeing experiencing with Gabriel, Timber. These players doing exceptionally well off the back of that. Newcastle as well have started the season exceptionally good for their expected goals conceded column. So have Bournemouth as well. I do expect these to probably go up a little bit over the next few weeks. However, are looking pretty decent across the board in terms of those numbers as well. So very good defenses to, of course, be investing in. Now, if we take a look at the 11ify numbers as well, of course, you want to go and check out their amazing website. There will be a link in the description for that one. But as you can see, these are the 11ify numbers for predicted clean sheets over the next few weeks. Again, we're seeing that Arsenal data look ridiculously strong, especially in game week 10 and game week 11. The lowest percentage being on there, 32% chance in game week 13. However, all the other weeks are looking stupendously good. We're also seeing Chelsea in there as well, which bodes well for Chalobah. Despite his red card, if he hadn't have got that, would actually be one of the best scoring defenders in the game. He's got set piece threat. He's got routes to DEFCON as well. And Chelsea, I think, have probably been a little bit hard done by with the amount of red cards, of course, that they have been picking up. They're going into a pretty decent fixture run here, and I would want to take, of course, full advantage of that. And I think picks like Chalobah, with, of course, these numbers and his routes to points, definitely feels like investable for me. Manchester City, despite the good numbers, I just don't think defensively I would want to invest in. They're actually one of the lowest sides that, of course, accrue defensive contribution points. They're right down there, and I just don't think there's any kind of justification in spending 5.9 million on, say, like a centre-back like Gvardiol right now. Yes, I know he got his assist in game week 7. However, if you look at how it came, it's not something that I think is going to be a repeatable action. He hasn't been, able to hit defensive contributions. And like I said, City as a whole have, of course, struggled with that metric. Newcastle we're seeing up there, so that bodes well for Nick Pope. Of course, if you wanted to go for Dan Burn as well, he could also be a very valuable option. Has, again, multiple avenues to points with the clean sheets, defensive contributions, and set piece share as well. We're also seeing good numbers for Fulham and Bournemouth over the next few weeks as well. So I really like Anderson. He's been an absolute DEFCON beast, so of course raising that floor up. And as you can see here, actually rotates fairly nicely amongst some of the more difficult fixtures for Bournemouth. As you can see, game week 9, you'd obviously start Senesi. Game week 10, you would obviously start Anderson. Then you've probably got a little bit of a choice over the next few weeks, but game week 13 as well, of course, you could just chuck Senesi back in and bench Anderson. So you've got a nice rotation there of two DEFCON guys that if push come to shove, I feel you'd be very acceptable playing because, like I said, their base has been raised from a 2, probably up to a 3 or a 4. So looking at that defense as a whole, like I said, I would be very, very happy with that. You've got a mix of guys who've got that opportunity for defensive contributions. They also play for pretty good defenses as well, who've been smashing it out of the park for expected goals conceded, and also have some pretty decent numbers coming up on the 11-5 model. That was the defense. Let's head into the midfield. Okay, let's dive into my midfield then. And I think this is a really, really solid midfield. You've got plenty of players here that, for me, have multiple routes to points within the of course, the starting 11 for this week. You've got Enzo, Paqueta, Semenyo, and Saka as all penalty takers. Obviously, an asterisk next to Saka and Semenyo as well. Of course, if Kluivert's on the pitch, you do feel we're going to have to see what happens in that situation. And Saka, I do still believe there is probably an asterisk between him and Gyökeres, who is actually going to be the penalty taker. Will we, of course, see potentially a bit of it, split share? But I still think for Saka, I would actually favour him over Gyökeres right now. Just because, again, he's got the multiple avenues to points. If he is on penalties, he's got that. He takes, of course, free kicks and corners as well for Arsenal, which we've seen they are an absolute unit at and one of the best sides for expected goals conceded. And how fitting would it be that you've got Gabriel and Timber in there, and Saka is the one probably picking up some assists from that as well. So I think he is probably the other alternative option, in my opinion, unless you wanted to go for that triple up in defence. We've also seen strikers absolutely mutilated in the bonus point changes this year, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that in a second as well when we get onto the forwards, and why, of course, I have switched to Saka away from, obviously, Gyökeres. The other midfielders then, it is looking unlikely that Cole Palmer, for me, is probably going to feature in this batch of fixtures before the international break. From all the reports we're hearing, he suffered a little bit of a setback with his groin injury, so that, for me, makes Enzo a fantastic pickup at 6.7. We can see with the 11-5 numbers that Chelsea are really, really fancied over this period. They've got some great fixtures, of course, their exceptional one being in game week 9 and game week 11 for predicted goals. So that bodes extremely well for the likes of Endo Fernandez, who will be playing in the 10 and will be on penalties, in my opinion, for Palmer's absence. Of course, there is João Pedro maybe hovering around that penalty position, but I do believe Enzo is going to be the penalty taker. He also takes corners as well, so you've got a guy there who's got multiple avenues to points with some great fixtures coming up, playing actually some of the worst sides for expected goals conceded are Chelsea over this period as well. So I think that does probably bode well for Enzo and for any other Chelsea attacking picks. We can also see Arsenal there as well, so it bodes well for Bukayo Saka with game week 10, 11 and 12 with some really, really nice and tasty fixtures coming up for them. Bournemouth as well, we've obviously got Semenyo in there. He's just been absolutely exceptional at the start of this season. I said early doors he could have a potential Brian Mbeumo breakout season. He's been doing some work with a kind of sports psychologist over the summer to kind of course, concentrate a little bit more on his finishing. And I think that is definitely something we have seen from him. He's been a lot more composed, a lot more kind of, prolific in front of goal, which, of course, in previous seasons we haven't really seen from him. So I think that is a big, big plus in my eyes for him as a potential option this year. I know, if you've already maybe missed out on some of the mega hauls, I'd still obviously pick him up on a wild card. I still think he's going to be an absolutely fantastic and terrific pickup. We've also seen some pretty good numbers for Crystal Palace and Brighton over that period. And you saw that Sarr was on my bench there. I just think he's one of those players that does, again, just if Palace have scored, it's probably going to be him, Mateta or Munoz that I would probably bank being the names that pop up on the Vidi printer on Sky Sports. So I think why would you not go for a guy that's got such a great record like that with some good fixtures coming up? Of course, you're probably going to have to, maybe bench him this week and next week. But after that, some really good fixtures. And Palace will have some European football, so that might be one to maybe monitor and might be why you might look at other alternative options. For example, Reinders. You've got Minter within that position as well. You've got, the cheaper guys that you could also drop down to maybe like a Caicedo, a Xhaka as well within that bracket. But we've also selected Paqueta as well, another player I think definitely worth considering. Again, a player who has got multiple avenues to points, which is something we're always looking for. It is those penalties, of course, as well. It is the ability to go and get some defensive contributions. And West Ham actually have some pretty good fixtures. And I think, Nuno's probably going to have, 2 weeks to work with the squad. Hopefully, we do see a more improved side and something that probably resembles what Nottingham Forest were last season, or maybe if you're looking a little bit further back to what we saw with Wolves a few seasons ago. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the midfield. I would maybe, potentially like a different player in there, but I think for me, it probably is about right, given the fact that we've got pretty much all the penalty takers for now in there as well, which is something I always look to use and abuse. So overall, I'm pretty happy with that midfield. Let's go and dive into our forwards. Okay, let's head into our 2 forwards then, and I feel this could probably be quite template for a lot of people over the next few weeks. Number one, let's start with Haaland. The guy is just absolute joke at the moment. What is it, like 18 and 11 for club and country right now? Honestly, just an insane record. He is going to be just a very easy captaincy option over the next few weeks, in my personal opinion. I just don't think Liverpool and Salah are quite at the races yet. So I do just think you're probably just going to leave it on Erling Haaland over the next few weeks and not have to worry about that as a potential decision. Now, a lot of people are probably going to be like, why have you put João Pedro in here? He's not been in good form. He's only had 1 shot in the past 3 fixtures and only picking up 6 points over that period. Well, it is the fact that Chelsea's run of games is just so good. And with very limited competition for João Pedro and players that are going to obviously eat into his minutes, I just think, why would you not maybe take a gamble on him over the next few weeks? There doesn't really seem to be any kind of other forwards or, of course, any other midfield options in the game right now that I would want to select or justify, dropping him down to a really cheap forward. Like, I just don't see the point. So I think with the fixtures that Chelsea have got coming up, with the 11-5 data, and with the fact that they're actually playing some of the worst sides for expected goals conceded over that next few weeks, and with potentially Ange maybe looking like he could get sacked over that time period, I do just think I would still stick with João Pedro. If we bring up the forwards here, this is the list of forwards point scoring over the opening 7 game weeks. You can see Haaland just absolutely clear by a mile, very easily a lock. Then you come down to kind of this like mid bracket where people have had like 1 or 2 good games, like João Pedro at the start, Bowen of course with the 3 games that he scored in, picking up maximum bonus, Ekitike at the start, Richarlison had 2 good games I think in there, Thiago obviously bumped by the goal against Manchester United and his penalty. And you look past that and you just do see like no real clear forward option. So why would you not select João Pedro? Like I said, there isn't really too much concern in terms of minutes. The fixtures are very, very good. And the 11-5 data is also suggesting that they could be good. I think, once we get past these good fixtures and he's still disappointing, then of course there will be that conversation to of course get rid of him and look to move to of course other forwards. But I think right now what we're seeing is forwards and especially penalty taking forwards be absolutely decimated within the game. Of course we saw a reduction in terms of the BPS scoring for penalty goals for forwards. It's gone down to 14, so it's not as kind of prolific as it was last season, where a lot of the time we saw a penalty taker get a goal. When they score that goal from the penalty spot, if they were a forward, they probably come away with 2 or 3 bonus points. We're just not seeing that this year. And we're also seeing kind of, I would say, really, really poor forwards in the way that the Premier League is kind of looking at the moment. Is that more defence and kind of set piece play is more important than, of course, open and kind of fluid attack, which, of course, is going to limit forwards and their overall point scoring ability. The forwards that I do like, if, of course, you're not convinced by João Pedro, probably would be somebody like a Bowen, in my opinion. The guy, for me, feels like he could be a little bit of a baseline BPS magnet this season. If you don't know what baseline BPS, that's pretty much the kind of points that you see when you load into a fixture. And if it's like, at the start of the game, people will be on like 8, 9, 10. Then, of course, if they get their key actions, they obviously bump themselves up. Jarrod Bowen is one of those players that every time he's scored so far this season has hit maximum bonus because his baseline BPS is currently the best amongst all forwards. Second, interestingly, is João Pedro as well. So maybe if we do see him get some goals, could be another one that could be hovering around the 2 to 3 bonus mark as well. That is why I've also selected Dominic Calvert-Lewin within this wildcard draft. I do just think, you know, rather than completely dead-ending that spot, let's just get a forward that could open the door up if you've not played your bench boost, or could just be a player that could come in if you absolutely need them to. And I think for me, the top options in terms of that cheap bracket are, of course, going to be Dominic Calvert-Lewin and are going to be Lyle Foster. 5 million, both of these guys are starting pretty consistently over the next few weeks, but I think it is that 0.5 million appeal of course, Calvert-Lewin having penalties. And the next few weeks, you could definitely play him. And like I said, if you've still got that bench boost available, it, of course, could look very, very good in game week 9 with a very favourable fixture coming up for Leeds United. So that is going to be the wildcard team. Like I said, I'm pretty happy with it. Let me know any players you would potentially change in the comments section. Let me know as well what your plans are for this week. Are you wildcarding, triple captain, bench boosting? Let me know in the comments section. If you did enjoy the video, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. Like I said, we're on that road to 20,000, and the best of luck for game week 8.